Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And today we've got a repeat guest on. I love repeat guests because it means they have so much great information that we weren't able to get it in the first hour. So please join me in welcoming Bill Coletti back to our program today. It's so good to see you, Bill. How are you doing?
Deb, it is great to be with you. Thanks so much for having me back. I always look forward to these conversations with you. So thank you very much.
I love it. I love it. Well, let me tell people a little bit about you and then we'll dive into this. So when relationships are critical to your business, your reputation is one of the most important assets you manage. In today's podcast, we're joined by Bill Coletti, a highly experienced and sought after reputation management strategist and speaker. Get ready for a deep dive session into the world of corporate crisis management. So again, Bill, welcome back.
Deb, it just, when we listen to your stuff and getting ready for this, I went back to listen to a couple of your previous podcasts, the recent stuff in early 2021. Mm-hmm. There just seems to be this theme of change. Nobody knows what's next. And we're all trying to new normal. And there's all these little buzz phrases and hybrid. I'm just hearing hybrid.
I know.
Whether in life
hybrid,
or in real
pivot, all of those words that were like, me. We don't want to hear them ever again.
Yeah, but they're real.
Yeah. And I looked up when we chatted last. And so your last visit was on January 27th of 2020. Mm-hmm. And of course, we had no idea then that just several weeks after we chatted, the world would come crashing down. And it really has been a year. Good and bad. I mean, I think there are so many things, but from your perspective, managing crisis communications and managing, reputations, what did you see?
Yeah. A lot. I mean, there's a lot to learn and there's a lot to share and for you to sort of help me talk about. For the first thing I always believe is ABC, always be communicating. And so I've had two CEOs that were clients say to me, I never realized how important internal communications was.
Right. Yeah. When people weren't in the office anymore, right?
Yeah. To figure out what to say and how to say it and say something, because we all want to be, as leaders, we want to be definitive and clear. We didn't know what was going to happen next week or next month. So it was really difficult. So one of the big key takeaways that the leaders that I work with focused on was this notion of, internal communication really matters. And my voice as a leader, what I say matters to my team and my team needs to hear from me. And I put that in the context of ABC, always be communicating. Just recently, in 2021, so this quarter, let's say, the same couple of CEOs and couple of others have been like, oh my gosh, do I still have to keep doing this stuff? And so the lesson learned of everybody was an internal communicator in the summer of 2020 to, oh my gosh, I don't have anything to say. Very short lesson that was learned in that context. But I do think a lot of leaders have realized that having something to say, filling that vacuum, filling the void, it's okay not to be perfect. It's okay to be in a dialogue. But there is fatigue. There's fatigue on the sender as well as the receiver in the basics of communication. So I think we've learned that. I think we've also learned about resiliency. So many, and we do a lot of work in higher ed, so many colleges and universities made fast pivots in March, April. A couple of my clients, it was this week and last week, middle of their spring break. Last year is when they pivoted and went online and made dramatic changes. And now they're starting to observe the bureaucratic lethargia impacting decision making. They were so proud of themselves, the speed at which they decided. And so that's a big change is are we going to let what was really good that we were proud of our decision making, are we going to creep back to over committee and over process?
Right.
And are we going to be afraid? And the last comment is this phrase that's been on my mind is that another thing that COVID's taught us is that scrappy is the new perfect.
Right.
Is that we did so many great things in 2020 that were not focus group, that were not planned, that were not perfect. We might have missed a comma every now and then, but they worked and people appreciated it. Can we learn from that and continue to be scrappy and not let perfection get in our way? So those are 3 or 4 big things I've tried to learn over the past year or so with our clients.
Right. And I'm a firm believer that companies need some type of crisis plan. And I don't care if you're somebody like me that, is here in a spare bedroom with my office set up, or a company that's, 10,000, 20,000 employees. You need those things in place. And so it does help when there is something that is, okay, you're shutting down your business today. And oh my gosh, we're not going to let your employees go back, or, all of these various things. And so, many companies hopefully did have at least some of the groundwork because, obviously nobody planned for a pandemic, but we could plan for things like, what if there's, something like a tornado? What if there's, sadly active shooter? All these various things that companies have needed to plan for. So it did make it a little bit better. But of course, we had no idea that it was going to be over a year, right? I still remember thinking when they initially said 2 weeks, we're going to shut everything down for 2 weeks. All of us went, yeah right.
Thinking it was going to be a month,
right?
Or 2 months.
A month. Yeah. A month, I think really was it. And then, I was thinking, several months. And then it was, maybe through the end of the year. And, and now I think we've reached the point where not only do we know, hey, it's never ending. I think we are thinking that by the end of this year, hopefully summer instead, things will get back to not normal, because we're not going to have normal again. I mean, we're going to have our new normal, but it really was one of those things where companies had absolutely no idea what to do. Because as you said, we didn't know what was going to happen. We had no idea when, say, public transportation would open back up again, when, vendors, I mean, that was the tricky thing, if you, all these things.
Childcare, another one, childcare.
Yeah. Or, all of a sudden, not only did you have all your employees at home, they had their kids at home. So there was no such thing as business as usual, because they weren't able to focus on business from 8 until 5 or whatever, because they had the kidlets there that they were teaching. And I think it really has been a good lesson for businesses on, as you said, how to be scrappy and just figure it out as we go.
Yeah. It's good. And I hope we learn those lessons. I hope we take some time. We have a tool that we use called an experience transformer. It lets us reflect back on our experiences, pick out the good, improve the bad. I hope people really can learn from all those things you just talked about, about the needs of people. I was on a panel discussion that I was facilitating, and just this notion of well-being, the well-being of our teams and the well-being of our people as leaders. It's on our mind, but I wouldn't say it's front of mind for a lot of us. It has become. All those things you just mentioned are basically about the well-being of your people, and the well-being of your customers and your suppliers and whatnot. I hope that notion of focusing on well-being wherever pulls through. I'm skeptical, but I hope it does. And I think it's incumbent upon us and you and your leadership role that you have to help people remember what we learned in 2020, to pull it through, because there are some good that have occurred of all this craziness.
Yeah, because when we think about our employees, you're thinking about them being where you can see them, where you can touch them, so you might pick up on things that
management by walking around was an adage you and I were both taught very well.
Or when you're in meetings, you're looking at the body language of people, all of these various things, and that's gone. I mean, it is just, and even if you're in, able to be in the same location, you might be talking to them through a mask. So, you're going to see their eyes. You're 6 feet apart, all these various things. I mean, all those things that we were taught in our leadership training programs.
All the tool, all the arrows that we got to use and the things in our quiver. So many of them are not deployable in this venue. So I was having a conversation with a woman who's a very successful not-for-profit president. She runs a large not-for-profit, and she's got a dynamic board and a public board, volunteer board, 20 or so people on her board. And in 2019, let's say, she was fortunate to get half of her board to be there. She needed half of the board for fundraising and half of the board for operations. She's noticed this phenomenon where she's had more people participating because of Zoom. On its face, that's awesome. But what she said is that the governance has gotten worse because I have more people half-assing it. I have more people that were really not engaged in the organization, but now have nothing else better to do and very candidly.
And so we just wanted their contribution.
They're participating, and they're like, well, we should do a fundraiser in the spring. And they're like, okay, we thought about that 3 years ago, and we're not going to. But so they are there. There's this hybrid. They're very excited to get everybody back together, but she's actually excited about the constraint that physicality is going to create. So there's so many different ways. This is wonderful. You and I can do this with technology, but so many different dynamics. And then the other thing that I'm concerned about is this notion of dispersion. We are spending more time with our like kind, which is family, which is wonderful. I love my family, but I'm not spending much time in community. I'm not spending much time in my neighborhood. And as companies deal with social justice, as companies deal typically led by white men, typically, and we've got to deal with these dynamic societal challenges, and we're not exposed to our cafeteria workers, or we're not exposed to people that maybe have a little bit of a different walk than we do, that's bad for leadership. And so I'm worried
we're
about
getting
that.
isolated in a lot of ways.
Yes. And that dispersion, that we're getting segregated unintentionally. I don't think anybody has ill in their, I think most of us don't have ill in our hearts, but we are being segregated, and we stay in our little communities, in our little bubbles. And that, A, is bad. B, if you're always communicating and you're trying to peer through the camera and talk to your part-time hourly workers and to your general counsel, that's a challenge. And you can't do all the things you just mentioned of management by walking around or whatever. Those are going to be more lessons learned that leaders are going to have to think about and figure out moving forward.
Right. And of course, one of the biggest things that so many leaders are going to have to be dealing with and have had for the year is, as you were saying, they can't do the walkabouts anymore. But more importantly, those micromanaging leaders, and I'm not going to call them a leader, the micromanaging managers, because you don't micromanage if you're a good leader. Those people have really struggled, because they can't watch their employees, their volunteers, their whoever they are, all the time. You only get that little snippet of maybe being on a video camera with them for a while. I think a lot of people really did discover that things were far different than what they ever thought. That people were able to get their work done at 11 o'clock at night. Some of them had to be doing their work at 11 o'clock at night. Other people were able to get their work done much more quickly because they didn't have the distractions of being in an office. And so the flexibility, that was it. That was the word I was looking for. The flexibility that we have had to really develop is fabulous in so many ways. But if you are one of those micromanagers, flexibility is not a word you like.
It is. And that lack of external stimuli and that absence of flexibility. And so as we look back to your point about planning, and I don't want to lose that point because it's such a good point. I was having a conversation recently, and they were talking about the intelligence breakdown with the situation at the Capitol in January.
Right.
And that there was this notion of a lack of imagination, that there was a breakdown in the ability to imagine the possibility. And we hear that a lot in a lot of postmortems about crisis situations
Right.
as well.
We never thought that could happen.
But in hindsight, yeah, that probably could have happened.
Right.
And so if you take all these things, is that I get to do this environment, we are limiting our interaction. When it comes time for us to design our plans, they're going to be relatively monolithic, where they're going to be focused on sort of the big pillars, which I don't inherently think is a bad thing, because I think that there are too many people that try to plan every permutation of everything. And I think there are basics.
You can't do that.
There are building blocks that you need, but you do need the potential for imagination. You do need the potential, because all good plans need to be tested in the real world and tested for their resiliency. So this notion that we're lacking external stimuli, people's expectations on us are greater, crazy stuff can happen, really to me means less about 36 binders on your shelf with all of the different plans that you can have. It's really more about, what do you stand for? What's your chain of command? And really figuring out some building blocks and some basics, as opposed to figuring out every permutation that you can think of.
Right. Yeah, because we can't figure it out. I mean,
nor should we.
And I mean, that's the thing, is we aim for the big things that maybe could have happened. But if you've planned for those, then when you have variations, you're much more able to deal with it. A good example would be computers being backed up on servers. That's great. A good crisis management plan would also say those, that needs to be off-site, because what if you can't get into your building? And so then that worked well. When all of a sudden nobody could get in the building, they still had access to that data. Obviously one of the biggest things that happened, especially for companies, was technology. Were their employees even able to work from home? Did they have that equipment? Did they have Wi-Fi? I mean, I was talking to a friend of mine who all of a sudden, she was normally home. She was a work from home. But 4 kids, her and her husband, were all of a sudden on Wi-Fi and needing really good Wi-Fi because they were all Zooming. And she said, not gonna happen. She said their little router went poof. But many people didn't even have the right equipment, and even some of basic equipment. I'm sure you remember hearing the people who were saying, we don't have desks, we don't have chairs. We're setting up on our kitchen table and
space.
All those various things. And I mean, you can't plan for that. You cannot plan for the fact that, all of a sudden your entire workforce is going to be home. But you could have thought about, okay, if there's a blizzard, I'm from Colorado, if there's a blizzard and people can't get into our office for a week, what can we do? Because what you could do in a week, you can do in a month, in a year, and so that's where having those plans in place helps.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing, so I hold 2 concepts when I think about all of these planning things, so the difference between good and great crisis response is speed, is being fast.
Right.
Okay. And we saw that in March, April of last year. People were fast, they pivoted, they moved quickly. The way you get fast in a crisis response is this equation about, what do you stand for, mission and values, plus your chain of command.
Right.
If I know who needs to be in the room to make decisions, both formally and informally, and I know what I stand for, it's pretty easy to be fast. And so if I know what's my North Star, I know that I need to call outside counsel, or I need to call, the wife of a senior board member, whatever the case may be. I know the chain of command. That makes me fast. The other thing, so that's important for planning. So let's work on that. Those are 2 really important things: strategic thinking about your mission, and then your chain of command. But then also is, what are the risks that we're worried about? What are we worried about? And you and I both in this conversation have pivoted, pinged on a couple of different things. I like to bucket them into 3 different kinds, sort of strategic risks, preventable risks, and external. So active shooter, a global pandemic are external. There's nothing.
You can't control those.
Nothing the Deb Incorporated can do to prepare for those. Completely external. And they require a response, one related to that we're all in this together, and I'm just going to keep communicating. Strategic risk, I meant to shut down this factory. I meant to lay off these workers. I meant to invest in China, whatever you meant to do. you meant to do it. And if people criticize it, the response is not to say, oh, I'm sorry, we didn't mean to do that. No, you certainly did. You certainly meant to do it. It was a strategy. You didn't do a good job of explaining it. And so let's now, instead of apologize and retreat, let's do a better job of explaining it. And then preventable things that we should have zero tolerance for. And the simple one is there should never be metal shavings in a hamburger. And, and we may have shared that previously, but that concept that simply shouldn't be there. And so we don't get defensive. We just apologize and fix it. And
we're
make
sorry,
hamburgers, make
up.
hamburgers without it. And so if companies would just streamline and simplify, and so they don't need to do planning around everything, but if they think about mission and values, chain of command, they think about what kind of risks, how would we respond? How should we respond? That then lets talented people, non-micromanaged, talented people make good decisions. And that's all that we can expect from our leaders. And that's all that we can expect from our teams, but we have to give them some frameworks. And those are what we're trying to talk about.
You know, and I think probably one of the things that really was highlighted during all of this and still is the strategic aspect. You know, and a big part of that is, you know, exactly what you work with people on, and that's that reputation management. You know, we saw companies that excelled and companies that failed big time. And the ones that failed and were not able then to get out of it, you know, and I always say, you know, clearly there were other issues. I mean, you know, the pandemic was just kind of the straw that broke.
It exposed the problem. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, because there were companies whose reputation took hit. And then others that you're like, holy schmoly. I mean, you know, Amazon obviously would be good. I mean, you know, there were some little things because, you know, they don't guarantee it next day now. Okay. You know, be patient, you know, not only, you know, we're doing so much more because of this. One of my favorite memes that I see going around on Facebook is one of the ones that says, we need to train our Amazon drivers to give vaccines. It'd be taken care of by Thursday.
Really true. Door to door.
Yeah. You know, but they came forward and they said, here's the explanation for it. You know, first of all, our employee safety comes first. So that means that we don't have people in our warehouses, not until we can make sure that they're safe. And it's pretty hard to argue, hey, I want my stuff the next day against that. Absolutely. Right. You know, but yeah, there were so many things that they did that were great examples. And we can look at that, you know, the small businesses too. I mean, you know, we can say, hey, you know, this was why this project didn't get done, or, you know, all those various things. And it's exactly what you're saying before. It's communication.
It is.
You know, if you tell people, you know, this was why I could not do this because my Wi-Fi did not work. You know, it took us a week to get that. I didn't have a desk. People are like, oh, okay.
And you want to get the benefit of the doubt. And that's one of the reasons you need, as either big company or small company, you need to invest in reputational thinking, different than brand thinking. Thinking about your reputation is because you want to get the benefit of the doubt. And so if as you and I were setting up this time to be together, you know, you have an expectation that if I was going to be late, and just like the example you just said, drop me a quick note, say, hey, I'm going to be 10 minutes late. Corporations can operate that same way. And I get pushback and they say, well, no, what we're talking about is way too complicated. Well, no, it's not. I have a relationship with you, regardless of what the industry is. I have a basic understanding of what you do and how you make money. And so just talk to me and let me know what's going on in a place where I can find it. You don't need to jam it down my throat, but just so that I can find it and understand it. Companies are starting to come to that realization that we can just talk not to our teams, but we can also talk to our public in a way that is just, you know, give me the benefit of the doubt. We're doing our best because we are committed to doing our best all of the time. And if organizations can screw up less, which is what you think about planning and training and make sure your organization is better. And when you do, fess up, fix it, and get back on strategy as fast as you can. Hopefully makes guys like me kind of unnecessary at some point. Is that when people tie their shoes in knots, that's when they need me. But tying your shoe is a relatively straightforward task that doesn't require a consultant. But you can screw it up. It's pretty complicated. And so
and then of course, when we screw it up, we're like, oh my God, we don't know how to get out of that. You know, and that's what happens a lot of times is we don't know how to get out of our own way. You know, I remember when I was doing crisis management, one of the things I would tell people, you, as you said, you need to fess up. And I would tell them, we need to say, we're sorry. And, and I said, and that really, in many cases, is all somebody needs to hear, except the attorneys, because the attorneys will say, oh, no, that means you're accepting responsibility. No, it doesn't. It means you're empathic and you're having empathy for that person. And you're just saying, I understand. We screwed up. We're sorry. And you don't even have to put the we screwed up in there, because that does, if you say we're sorry. And
we're fixing it. I think there's a second part, and we're fixing it, and we're going to get back to normal as fast as we can, or by Thursday we will be, or whatever the case may be. That's there. I love that point. And so glad you brought that legal point up. It's brilliant. So that sentiment, let's call it, that sentiment that, well, the legal counsel won't let me say I'm sorry. That's the short phrase for what you just said so nicely. I've heard that maybe 10, 15 years. I've heard that for a very long time. When I've been doing this for about 25 years now. And so I have been on a journey to really try to disprove that and actually go to the primary source, actually go to attorneys, both plaintiffs' attorneys and defense attorneys, because it's the defense attorneys that typically are saying that our inside counsel or outside
corporate counsel is going, no.
Yeah, corporate counsel
hide,
is really asking them and then asking the plaintiff's attorney. And so let's start with the plaintiffs guys. They're the defense guys are always afraid they're going to get sued, and they're afraid that Mrs. CEO is going to be sitting in front of this really scrappy plaintiff's attorney and going to give them a heck of a time, and they're going to lose their job because we
all saw it on TV, right?
Exactly. And I've asked plaintiffs attorneys, and one of my best friends is a very prominent plaintiffs attorney, and I've said, what do you do with a company that apologizes versus a company that doesn't? And he goes, we are just praying that they don't apologize. Right. We wish they wouldn't apologize, because when they do, they actually don't look like the big jerks that we're trying to make them look like. So the downside is, and it's more complicated than just saying the words. It's actually having the action. I can say I'm sorry, but not do anything about it. So that's why I friendly edit to what you said. It's apologize,
and if you do it again, then it's even worse.
Then you're in trouble. Absolutely. But these plaintiffs guys, I've said, are you going to take advantage of a company that apologizes? No, they're not, because they actually think that's a bad thing, or it actually helps the defense side.
Right.
The defense attorneys that I've asked about it, if you really press them, and I said, can you give me an example in a deposition of where your CEO or your client has really been scarred, damaged in a deposition because they apologized? Well, it's a slippery slope to fault. And I said, well, no. Tell me an example of where someone, and they don't. So both sides prove the opposite of your point, which is so perfect. And so I'm trying really hard to change that. And I work closely with general counsels. And if we are going to work together, it's one of the things I talk about in advance. And that goes back to planning. Ask, as a CEO and a leader, ask my legal team, if I were to have a problem, what's going to be your guidance? I want to know, am I going to have to fist fight with you over the apology? My instinct is probably to apologize, or do you think it's okay? So that's instead of every permutation, plan for these types of scenarios, or what are you going to let me say? That's really valuable.
Yeah. I tell people it's kind of like, when we're actually in a restaurant, because we can do that kind of. I haven't been in a restaurant for months, but, when we're allowed to do that again, I put my purse down, waiter trips on it, spills a thing of water on me. There's two reactions. The waiter can go, lady, your purse was in the way. Then I'm mad. Doesn't matter what happens after that. I'm just mad. But if he says, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, can I give you a free dessert? I think that's the greatest restaurant in the world. Even though it was my purse that tripped him. Now, it's not like I put my purse out there, so he would trip. There's, but yeah, I mean, it's just that simple. I'm sorry. Here, what can I do to make it better? And then of course, the important thing is, not only do I think they're the greatest thing in the world, I'm probably going to go on Facebook and on Yelp and all these various places and say, I was stupid enough to put my purse out where he tripped on it, but oh my gosh, I got a free dessert. What a cool place. Highly recommend them, because that is part of reputation management, is you want to have built up those good good vibes with people so that they come to your defense, because it's just like an ad. I can see an ad. I'm like, yeah, right. Of course, Bill's going to say they're the greatest company in the world.
Sure.
But when somebody else tells me Bill's company is the greatest company in the world, I'm like, oh, well, they must be.
Yeah. But why is that? So let's use your restaurant example.
Yeah.
I would hope that the manager or the owner or somebody like that, the leader, did some training,
right,
and said, this is the way we're going to handle things. This is when these situations happen, do this, as opposed to crossing my fingers and hope that, that Johnny on the floor is going to figure it out. But it goes back to training. And that's what people want. They want to be respected. You wanted to be respected in that example. I really believe there's so much room for grace in corporations that waiter in that example showed you grace, and you then showed grace in return. Corporations, and it's I think thankfully waning, that corporations were trying to sneakily get away with stuff that were bad things. I just think that's changing. Yeah. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think people still screw up. They do stupid things, and they should apologize. In that, but I do think, back to reputation management, there are a number of levers, there are a number of things that we can control as a company. And that's absolutely training your people. Right. Is one of the critical elements of managing a reputation for the long term.
Right. And with that training comes empowering them. That waiter needed to know that A, he could offer me a free dessert, and B, it wasn't coming out of his pocket.
Yeah.
And I think that is where we just as consumers get so frustrated when we're dealing with somebody, and we get the runaround. It's funny. We're in the process of thinking about buying a new car. So, we're at the dealership, and I told the guy, I said, now you need to understand one thing. You do not go and talk to your manager and come back with this thing with happy faces written on it. I said, no, I want your price. I want to know what your price is. And that's where we're going to go. I said, yeah, we end up negotiating a little bit more. I said, but I know that when you're off talking to your manager, you're not talking about my deal. You're off talking about the baseball game that, and all those things. And then they write the little happy face and send it back. I said, don't do that. That annoys me. And so it's a matter of, that car dealer, and he looked at me and he laughed, and I said, I got to tell you, most people don't like the dickering part anymore. They do want to know, here's the price. Yeah. But he said, but I do have flexibility. And so that's the thing, is we have to let our employees know, you know what, there's, and maybe, back to the restaurant example, everybody has like a $10 limit, okay, so they could give away, so they're not giving me the filet with lobster, but he has given me a free dessert, but it's exactly as you said, it's all in that training.
And it goes back to where we were. I love this conversation. It's so amazing that it's nice and cyclical nature. It goes back to mission and values. Yep. Okay. Because there are some restaurants that are like, hell no, that's margin. We're a tiny margin business, so hell no. There are others, high reputation restaurants, that will actually think about and do that delineation of $10 and set it up the way you just described. That's the distinction between high reputation firms. Now that is nothing to do. We've not talked about the flavor or the kitchen or the atmosphere of this restaurant. That's brand. Okay, that's different. This is reputation. And this is about the way we interact with people and the way people expect us and what they expect of us to do next in order to do the behaviors that you talk about on social. And but that goes back to mission and values, and you've led them as well as I. Our eyes glaze over when we're going to talk about mission and values, but gosh, it matters. And it matters. And I wish one of my fantasy visions of measurement, I wish I could empirically measure the value of a mission and value, because it makes you faster. It makes you speedy. If you take the time to go slow, to go fast.
If you have really to go works. Ask permission to do no.
Yes. Is this what we stand for? And then extrapolate it out to a larger enterprise where there's, some larger industrial accident that happens, or data breach. But frankly, data breaches are becoming less, they're sadly a little bit passé right now. But another type of these events, you're better prepared to respond. You know what type of risk you have. You've thought about that. You know who needs to be in the room, and then you move quickly get past it and get back on strategy,
Right.
which is the objective. We all want to get back to what we thought we were going to make us money on Monday. And we want to keep doing that every day.
Right. You know, and again, we can't plan for everything.
No.
But and we don't want to. I mean, you know, while it would be great as crisis management people to be, because it keeps you busy, but yeah, I mean, you can't. But it is that thing. If you want to be known for great customer service, then that better be what you do all the time. And all those various things. I mean, I keep coming back to Amazon. There have been a couple of times where I have, gone in and said, I need a refund for X. And, and basically it's been, I ordered the wrong thing. So it's my fault. It's not that it came damaged. It's not, I ordered the wrong thing. And they're like, here is your return. That's it.
No fuss, no muss.
Yeah. And granted, they have huge margins for things like that. But yeah, I mean, we can do that as the small business owner too, and say, oh my gosh, I'm sorry that we did not meet your expectations. Here's what we're going to do to fix it. Yeah.
One of the things, so Seth Godin, obviously such a great thinker, has a definition of what reputation is. And what he says reputation is, that it is the public's expectation of the next thing you're going to say, do, make, or produce. All right.
I love that.
It's around expectation. And I sort of mash those together to get up this concept of nexpectation. What is the expectation of what you're going to do next? And so it was my expectation, as you and I sat down, that we're going to have an amazing, rich conversation that's going to be free flowing and fun, but really smart. All right. Because of the first opportunity that we had. And you've built, for the people that are listening to this podcast, people have an expectation of doing that. And if you fail to deliver, you'll know it. You'll be the first one to know if you fail to deliver it. But there is an expectation of saying, well, that's not the Deb I know. That's not the podcast I know, or that's not the experience I know. These are the measurement tools that we're looking at, is how do we develop an expectation? And it takes a long time to change. So if I were to say Walmart, tell me about their reputation, you might talk about low, cheap prices, stuff from China. And, they probably don't pay their people that well. And maybe if you're really enlightened, you'll talk about all the fossil fuels that they burn to light, air condition, and have all the trucks.
Right.
And Walmart, one of the nation's largest solar energy users, has an amazing program for college, paying for college tuition for their associates. Their associates are so incredibly loyal, and very few people high up in the organization didn't start in the store somewhere. So those expectations of Walmart are not true, but gosh, they take a long time to change. And they know, in talking with them, we're going to do it over the long term, and we're going to do it to the people that matter. There's the 80-20. There's a crowd out there that we're never going to convince, but we're going to do it for the long term, because they know their mission and values, and they know what they stand for. It's so nice to hear that.
Yeah. And of course, the bad part about the pandemic was it really, through all that, it discombobulated a lot of that.
So much.
Because, when you're talking about how you treat your employees, and that might be a big part of your mission, whoa, they're not in your office anymore.
Yeah.
And
I have Taco Tuesday.
Yeah. No Taco Tuesday, no letting them be volunteers on Wednesday, all of these various things. But it's back to the basics. Okay. We know that our employees like Taco Tuesday. So, we're going to send them coupons for whatever, and we're going to say, okay, we still want you to volunteer. So just send us something, send us a picture that shows you volunteering.
Creativity. It takes creativity and energy. And that's what reputation management is about. It's constant. It's perpetual. It's the same as employee management, which is constant and perpetual. Back to where we were, management by walking around, engaging. Reputation management is no different. It is always on, and you always have to be mindful and creative and energetic and enthusiastic. and course correct when you need to. But yeah, there are these levers I talk about in this book that I wrote, and we talk about these levers that you can control to actually manage that. But clarity around your mission, talking to your employees, making sure that your products solve the right problems. There are empirical things, and it's not some big vapor consultant way or talking about reputation management. It is actually manageable, just like inventory control, HR, legal, or procurement can all be managed. It can be managed the same way.
Right. And it does, because it's intangible, it does make it more difficult. I mean, but
not impossible.
That you've got 10 widgets on the shelf and 5 on order, but it's like, what is your reputation? And of course, the easy way is to ask. Or more importantly, listen. What are people saying about you? That is the thing with social media. Holy schmoly. You can get a pretty good idea of what people are saying about you just by going online, and doing a simple search, and you put in your company name and see what comes up.
Absolutely. And yes, absolutely. 100%. But keep your filter on. There's either a BS
people
filter.
Love to complain.
Exactly. And very few people talk about getting tripped by the purse. That's not
they're going to say that idiot spilled water on me.
Exactly. And so keep your glasses on. And with social media and media monitoring, which we do a ton of for our clients, there's a critical skill. And if you do it just on your own, determining smoke from fire. Right. Is this smoke or is this fire? I'm going to learn. I'm going to listen, but it should always keep you curious. Even if you're smoke or fire, you got to remain curious about the source and the situation at hand. So I worry sometimes that people over-index or freak out about social a little bit. Because if you're a big company and you're a big concept, you're going to hear a lot of external chatter that could easily distract you. Again, more reason to have mission and values that matters on the front end. Right.
And it comes back to exactly what we were saying before. You have to know your messaging, all of those various things. When I work with my clients and talk about negative reviews, I tell them, unless it is something that we truly could report, so bad language, things like that, I said, we have to deal with it. I said, and the first words we put in there are, we're sorry. And I said, and then we offer the remedy, we're sorry this happened, yada, yada, yada. I said, and then we give them somebody to talk to, call this person, call that person. I said, and 99.9999999% of the time, the person who originally posted will never respond. They're not going to go back and say, oh, hey, thanks, Bill, for letting you know. Usually they've gone on, they don't even read it. But what's important is everybody else who reads it.
Who saw it.
Because they're looking at it going, oh my gosh, this business got this complaint. Here's how it was handled. And whoa, the person who complained couldn't even come up with a response. And so that's the important thing is it's not for the complainer. It's for the other people who are reading it.
But gosh, that's hard. And I know in the coaching and counseling you're doing with clients, that is so hard because we want to be problem solvers, mano a mano, one-on-one. And it's difficult to have that discipline. The thing that I talk about is the good old fashioned 80-20 rule is that what are the reasonable expectations of reasonable people made by a responsible company? All right. So we are your clients we work with, they are responsible companies. So I want to focus on the reasonable expectations of reasonable people. And that may or may not be the complainer themselves. But that's okay. That's the 80-20 is let's focus on the 80. Haters going to hate. Taylor Swift all taught us that. And so I think we really sort of focus on the 80. We'll be in such better shape, and the sanity of our CEOs will be so much better if we focus on the things that truly matter.
And of course, if we ignore it, I always tell them that's the worst thing to do, because then the haters pile on.
Totally. Oh, that happened to me too, or I got tripped last month, or whatever the case may be. Absolutely. And it is a mistake, and that's smoke versus fire, and that's not a perfect science. Sometimes it's one-to-one, mano a mano, every situation. Other times it's like, maybe I don't, maybe I do. And so there's judgment that's there. And that's just what fits your values. Yeah. Really good stuff.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and it's just, it's such fun. And I always tell people, like I said, that they always have to respond. One of my favorite examples, we're traveling and, I look at TripAdvisor for hotel reviews. And there was somebody that said, horrible, awful, don't stay there again. It was the noisiest place in the world. When the bar next door got out, there was all this in the parking lot, yada, 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 yada. And I still remember the response. And this was years ago. The hotel responded and said, "We're so sorry you had that experience. However, we are not located where we have any bars near us." And, and so, just the fact that they apologized for the experience, we all went, "Oh, okay." Yeah. But then they very clearly dealt with the fact that you weren't here, you dingbat. Exactly. But they didn't do it that way. They just said, we're assuming that you are confusing us with another place. But yeah, I mean, they still started out by saying, "We're sorry you had that experience."
Totally. And reputation management is exactly that sophisticated. It is sophisticated and thoughtful and being intentional. And corporations do not have to be, the skinny kid at the beach getting picked on by everybody. You can actually stand up for yourself and say, "No, I'm sorry. I don't think that's the exactly right situation." And you can do it with kindness and do it with grace. Right. But you don't have to be the skinny kid in that example.
Yeah. And we saw a lot of that especially during the early times of COVID, when there was so much disarray and nobody knew what the heck was going on. We saw a lot of finger pointing. We couldn't do this because, well, I don't care. And again, it was just, if somebody complains, you could have said, as we're all going through this. We're in this together, which, that's kind of one of those things that we're getting tired of. Yep. But at the same point, it's like, we're trying our best. So, that's but yeah, if they would have just said, well, we couldn't ship on time because, no. So
excuse making is really good. Rarely does excuse making work.
Oh yeah, because then we're thinking we're talking to a 12-year-old, right?
Totally.
The dog ate my homework.
No, it didn't. Yes, it did. No, it didn't. No, it doesn't work. Very.
But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where companies, I think the biggest thing they need to remember is, in the marketing world, we talk about B2B. We're doing business with business. And we need to remember that when we're responding in times like this, it's human to human. The business has to act like it's a human and empathize with people.
And it'll help you legally. It'll help you with the situation at hand, which is your point. But as I mentioned, legally, it'll also help you with your employees. It helps you with regulators, because someone may come in, if you're a highly regulated industry, somebody will come in and look at you and say, "Well, how'd you handle this?" Right. It's absolutely the right thing to do. So when you're working with your clients, I'm curious if it's similar to us. It makes perfect sense to you and I, as we're standing on this podcast talking about this. And why doesn't everybody just do it the easy way?
Yeah. Hello.
How are you? What are some tips that you've had of sort of helping folks get over the speed bump, helping clients kind of get over the hump to have that clear epiphany that you and I have elegantly so have clarity? How do we help people get over the hump?
I think a lot of times it's to show examples and to say, this is what happened when this company did this, the good and the bad. Here's what happened when they, it's just like talking to the two sides of the attorneys. Here's what happened when company A did this. Here's what happened when company B did this. Don't we want to be like company B? And because when it gets so esoteric, people don't, but if you show examples, they're like, oh yeah. That makes sense.
Yep. Show alternatives. You can choose this path or this path. And it helps to have pattern recognition and sort of understand, if you do this, you do that, and then here's what will be the implication. Right. But yeah, sometimes it helps. And that, again, all goes back to the planning. I'd love to do that and push across mocked up headlines across the table on a clear sunny day. I've done it at the the pointy end of the New York Times barrel, which is not the way to do that.
No.
Right. But sometimes you have to. But yeah, that's all fits into that planning, and that's what people that are listening to us that have the responsibility to think about reputation. These are the tips, little things that you can do to help nudge your organization, or even if it's you're the leader, these are the things that you can do, sort of nudge yourself to be thinking about how do we try to improve our reputation.
Right. And it ultimately comes back to exactly what you've been saying. They have to know their mission, and so the response is, remind people how much we care about our employees, our staff, our, whoever it is, remind them that is our ultimate goal. But of course, as you said, it has to be that goal. I mean, we can't look at it and go, well, they might say they care about this, but we know they don't. And so that, you have to have your house in order before you can do a lot of these. And I mean, I think that one of the things about the pandemic was it made a lot of companies rethink this, and really sit down and think, okay, how can we be better? How can we, because they know we are going to be different now. So, now is the time to make some good decisions and go forward better.
Yeah. And it's so good. And one of the things I think about is, what does the future look like for crisis response and reputation management? And there's some really interesting thinkers that are thinking about it at a business model context, not in an industry context, but at a business model. All right. So Facebook. All right. So Facebook and Zuckerberg have been in front of Congress about 10 times.
Right.
So he's been hauled up there in front of various committees.
They've shook their little fingers at him.
Because the business model is inherently untransparent.
Right.
All right. They're making money on advertising, and you and I have a free experience, but it's not free. Our stuff's being sold and we don't even know about it. As opposed to a Peloton or an Apple, it's a membership, it's a subscription. I'm giving you something of value. You're paying me for something of value. And so these business models, and you can even extrapolate it back to the energy companies of the 80s and 90s. They were exploiting our natural resources and not doing much in return for the exploitation, because they had big trucks and technology to exploit natural resources. We're now seeing a different way of thinking. So one of the things I do that I'm excited about is, how do I think about crisis response from a business model standpoint? How do you make money? And is that in line with your customers' expectations? I sell a service and I receive a price for that. Or is it something where I'm trying to leverage data? And I guarantee those are the companies that are going to get themselves in trouble. And Zuckerberg, even with a Democratic controlled Congress, we're still going to see him drug up there. And I still think some of these big companies are going to get broken up. And that's the ultimate crisis. Right. I mean, that's off strategy when you break up my company.
Yeah. And it is, as you were saying, it's all about planning for that.
Thinking.
We know that people are going to object to the fact that you're mining the data. Great example, Facebook. So then explain why. And it's so funny, because I have this discussion with people, about once a week, where somebody says, well, I don't like it because da-da-da-da-da. And I say, okay, first of all, you, the user, get to use their toy for free. So they do get to kind of make the rules. They own the playground, so they can make the rules for the playground. And I said, but at the same point, I mentioned looking for a new car. All I had to do in a Facebook post was say, I'm looking to buy this make and model car. And now I don't have to shop anymore, because all those ads are disappearing.
They'll find you, for gosh sakes. Absolutely.
And if it slows down, well, I mention it again and the ads pop up again. So, I kind of like that convenience, but yeah, it is, the whole transparency thing, and I understand there are certainly times where companies can't be transparent. I mean, there's all sorts of things. But other times when they have to be. I mean, I think one of the biggest examples of that right now are the pharmaceutical companies who, were going through all of this testing, all of this incredibly fast testing with all of these vaccines. And so they really are, for the most part, being, fairly transparent, certainly better than what they've done in the past, because they didn't have to be. Now they do. We're saying, well, wait a minute, there was that one person in, outer Mongolia who died after they got their shot. And, 10 years ago, 2 years ago, heck, they would have ignored that.
Totally.
And now it's like, okay, we're terribly sorry that happened to that person. Here were the underlying factors. And then of course they point out, here are the safety features that we're doing. Are they going to, it's like you said, 80-20. There's still going to be people, nope,
There's still gonna be haters.
I'm not going to take that. But everybody else goes, okay, well, it's, they answered my questions. And so I'm cool with that.
Yeah. So many, and that's a big future for me, is that so many companies, they just have flawed business models. And when they make these mistakes, and I've done it. I mean, I worked at a big global PR firm and worked for big global companies, and they weren't doing good things. And I tried to make good things look, or bad things not look so bad.
Lipstick on the pig.
Lipstick on a pig. Absolutely. But I just think I've come to this clarity that it doesn't have to be that way. Companies can just be more transparent and don't, when you screw up, fix it, move on, and don't make a quick big drama about it. The big challenge everybody's going to have, and maybe this is something we should talk about next time we're together, is this notion of social risk, these risks around. It's one thing about industrial risk and risks about your reputation, but what am I going to say about Black Lives Matter? What am I going to say about guns?
Right.
We're talking today in the shadow of two tragedies. Is that, how do companies deal with that? And that social risk is a little things that impact populations, impact groups. That's going to be a greater challenge for companies moving forward, which it means they need to accelerate solving the things they can solve, which is about their business model. But great conversations to have.
And the other thing with that is, it's not just the company, it's the people in the company. How many times have we seen that a company has a great, policy, all these various things, and then, the CEO 10 years ago posted something on Twitter, and all of those various things. I mean, it's, that's obviously where people like you come in to do training with people to say, okay, you are your company. Your employees are your company. You need to have policies in place that say you can and can't do this. And if you do, well, there's ramifications.
There's consequences. Absolutely.
But it was funny. I was having this discussion just yesterday with somebody, because, huge college basketball fan. Yes, I know your Seminoles beat my Buffs. But of course I was my little trigger button, and I hate that word, trigger, but was seeing the posts about the disparities between the women's basketball and men's basketball.
The weight room stuff.
The weight rooms, the food, the swag bags. I mean, those were the big three. And, and so it was one of those things where it was like, okay, they, and NCAA, they just stick their foot in it. Then they stick their foot in it some more, and all of these various things. But, one person, and I rarely don't post on Facebook on things like this, just because, I try and keep, sunny, rosy, happy. But I posted about it, and one person said, what's going to happen? They're going to start telling those kids they can't have cell phones, because it was one of the athletes that posted everything.
Sure.
And I'm hoping that they don't go that far.
No.
Because they can't. I mean,
why don't they just fix the problem?
Yeah, I know. And that's the thing. It's like, okay, so you can have all these policies that say, you can't have your cell phone. Or if you have your cell phone and you post a negative picture, then you don't get a play. Fix the problem, because you're going to come out much better in the end saying, here's what we have done to fix the problem.
Or say dollars and cents. This experience will generate this much. This experience will generate half that much. And just like everything else, I'm putting all my assets into my Florida factory because it produces more widgets than my Kentucky factory. I mean, you can do it. I mean,
and as much as I don't like it, I understand the financial aspect.
Absolutely.
They're
Gets into issues of gender and there's complexities, but yes, we could at least have a conversation.
But then you still, and I told one person who was, and I said, I understand that. And I said, but if they really start promoting the women's stuff more, maybe there will be more people who watch, and therefore their revenue will go up.
But it's where do you start the conversation? Do we start the conversation with what rule can I interact to make people not post on that, or how can I change the experience? So it depends on where, and that's where you and I can help people, is where do you start the conversation? Where you start it from rules, or are we going to start it by opportunity? I would love to start conversations around opportunity.
Opportunities are so much better, because then almost always it's a win-win.
Totally.
You know,
Rules
and so
means,
that's the
by
thing.
definition, you have rules, you have losers when there's rules.
Right, right. Oh my gosh, Bill. You know, this is why I
Always a
have to
treat
set
for
a
me,
timer.
Deb.
You know, we're at the top of the hour. You know, we've mentioned it, but tell us more about what your company does and how you can help people.
Yeah, so we're Kith is the name of our firm. We do
Mhm.
crisis communications and reputation
Mhm.
management, and we serve organizations when they're having bad days,
Mhm.
when they need to figure out what to do next,
Mhm.
when they're at the crosshairs of public
Mhm.
expectations and their strategy. We've just launched a new program called Kith Academy, which is a training program
Mhm.
on the mindset and
Oh, great.
behavior for
Mhm.
strategic communicators.
Mhm.
And so we're actually taking what I've learned over the past 30 years of
Mhm.
as a trusted advisor and trying to bring that back
Mhm.
into organizations so that they can do it for themselves. So we try to help organizations manage, prepare,
Mhm.
and think about some of their worst days.
Mhm. Great. You know, and you've got great resources on your website, you know, great blog posts, because a lot of people are thinking, okay, I'm this little person, I have this tiny little budget. You know, there's still lots of
Happy to
great
be generous.
resources. Yeah.
Happy to be generous because
Mhm.
maybe it'll be a big company one day, or maybe that individual will be at a
Mhm.
bigger firm one day.
Yep. You
Who
never
knows?
know
Happy
who
to be
they
generous.
know.
Yeah,
Mhm.
totally.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Right,
very,
right.
very good stuff.
So again, it's Kith, Kith, Kith.
.co
Yep.
is for the website.
Yep,
Yep.
not .com, .co. You know, and so please go there for resources. If somebody wants to connect with you, how do they do that?
So the website's the best, easiest and best
Okay.
place. I'm really active on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
LinkedIn, it's just Bill Coletti,
Mhm.
Coletti.
Mhm.
We try to do some stuff on Twitter. LinkedIn's our number one place. And
Mhm.
then there's nothing wrong with good old fashioned email off the website. It,
Right.
it gets to me fast
Mhm.
and it's
Mhm.
directly to me. So happy to engage on any one of those channels. Pretty easy to find if you want to find me.
I love it. Well, obviously, can't wait to do this again. We're going to have so much fun because it's great conversation. We're talking about information that is good for everybody, and so I hope that we are able to do this
I do
again.
too.
We shouldn't wait a year again. I mean, you know,
No,
because it
God
was
knows what could
yeah.
happen.
I know. Oh my gosh. Hopefully, if we do this again in a year, you know, we're talking about all the really good things. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting the next time we chat because there are so many things we can talk about. But before then, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
Pull out the newspaper. If you're a leader at an organization, pull out a newspaper, rip out a headline and say, what if this had happened to us?
Mm.
And just ask your team weekly, monthly, annually, whatever
Mhm.
the case may be. It'll illuminate mission and values. It'll illuminate chain of command, may identify if you have insurance for that, but just
Mhm.
pull something out and say, if
Mhm.
this had happened to us,
Mhm.
if someone criticized our women's bathrooms from our men's bathrooms,
Mhm.
how would we respond?
Mhm.
And that's just a very simple
Mhm.
practice that any organization, big or small, can think about.
I love it. I love it. Well, I've been having an absolutely fascinating discussion with Bill Coletti. I got my little tongue tangled up there. With Bill Coletti, I'm Deb Creer, and until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.